Have you ever met someone who appeared, by every visible measure, to have their life together, steady, capable, present, and was quietly, privately, exhausted by the effort of pretending? Maybe that person is you. Maybe you have carried something for so long that you have stopped calling it a wound and started calling it personality. The hypervigilance you have named cautiousness. The flinching you have named sensitivity. The 3 a.m. heart pounding you have named anxiety, as though naming it explains it, as though the name is the same thing as the answer. You have been told to think positively, to let it go, to give it time. Perhaps you have tried medication, and it helped with the edges but left the center untouched, like painting over a crack without repairing what caused it. What if the reason nothing has fully worked is not because you are too broken to heal, but because the methods you have been offered were never designed to reach the place where the wound actually lives? What if one woman's 15-year journey, and the 4 doors she finally found, could show you the difference between managing pain and genuinely moving through it? Stay with me until the end, because this story is not about willpower or positive thinking or pushing through. It is about something quieter and more profound, and it may be the thing you have been looking for without knowing what to call it. In a mid-sized city in Ohio, there lived a 38-year-old woman named Diana who had been called strong for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to need something. Diana was, by every outward measure, a person who had her life in order. She was a school librarian, a job she had chosen deliberately, for the quiet it offered and the children it served, and the particular sanctuary of rooms full of books where nobody demanded anything from her except competence, which she had in abundance. She had a small apartment she had made genuinely beautiful, plants crowding every windowsill with the particular insistence of living things that had been well cared for. She had friends who loved her, who called her the strong one, who brought her their problems the way people bring problems to someone they trust to hold them carefully. Diana held everyone's problems carefully. Her own she kept in a room she had learned, over 15 years, not to enter. At 23, she had survived 3 years inside a violent relationship. By the time she found her way out, she had become fluent in a set of skills she had never asked to learn: how to make herself small, how to read a room for danger, how to exist in a way that attracted no attention and offered no target. The bruises had healed. The apartment had changed. The years had passed in the way years pass when you are focused on the practical business of continuing. But something in Diana had not moved. She startled at loud voices. She flinched when men stood too close in grocery lines. She had tried 3 different antidepressants over the years, each one discussed carefully with a careful doctor, each one taken faithfully, each one offering a kind of muffling that she had been grateful for without being foolish enough to call it healing. Her therapist at the time had said, gently, that the medication helped manage symptoms, but that she would need to go deeper. Diana had nodded, and gone home, and cried into her pillow because she did not know what deeper meant, or how to find it, or whether she was the kind of person for whom deeper was even available. The thing that haunted her most was not the memories themselves. It was the way her body had refused for 15 years to believe the danger was over. Her mind knew she was safe. Her nervous system had never received the message. Every alarm was still set. Every door was still locked. She was living in a body that was permanently, stubbornly, exhaustingly stuck in 2009. She had become, without meaning to, a stranger in her own skin. The breaking point did not look like a breaking point. It looked like a Tuesday. Diana was at her desk, processing a new batch of children's books when a colleague knocked on the open door behind her. 2 sharp knocks, nothing unusual, and she dropped everything in her hands, heart slamming, body already halfway to the wall before her mind caught up with where she was. The colleague apologized, concerned. Diana said she was fine, laughed it off, retrieved the books from the floor. She sat at her desk for a long time afterward. 15 years. She had been telling herself that the episodes were getting less frequent, that the work she had done and the time that had passed were adding up to something. But a knock on an open door in a library full of children had sent her body into full emergency response, and she had no language for how tired she was of this, of managing it, of the performance of fine. She thought about what her therapist had said years ago, about going deeper. She had not known then what that meant. Sitting at her desk with her heart still not quite settled, she understood that she had run out of reasons to keep avoiding finding out. At a work conference on childhood literacy 3 weeks later, Diana sat next to a woman named Priya at lunch, a school counselor from Portland with an easy laugh and a quality of stillness that Diana noticed immediately, the way you notice something in another person that you have forgotten was possible in yourself. They talked about work, about burnout, and then, carefully, about more. Priya had not pushed. She had simply left a door open with the particular skill of someone who knew what it felt like to need one, and Diana had walked through it. She told Priya things she had not told most people, about the years she did not discuss at dinner parties, about the 3 antidepressants and the careful therapist and the knock on the library door, and the 15 years of being the strong one while privately being exhausted by the weight of what strong had cost her. Priya listened without the expression Diana had learned to dread, the careful, flinching sympathy that made her feel like a problem to be handled. She listened like someone who recognized the territory. "I used to be where you are," Priya said simply. "I didn't think anything could reach the place the trauma lived. I was wrong." Diana looked at her, at the stillness, at the quality of someone genuinely present in their own life rather than managing the distance between themselves and it. "What changed it?" she asked. "4 things," Priya said, "and none of them came in a bottle." Diana drove home that evening and sat in her apartment for a long time. She looked at the plants on the windowsill, all of them alive, all of them tended, and thought about what it would mean to give herself the same quality of attention she gave everything else in her life. She thought about the knock on the door, about 2009, about the room she had not entered in 15 years. She thought about the word Priya had used, wrong, as in the belief that nothing could reach that place was not a fact. It was a conclusion she had drawn from tools that had not been the right ones, and conclusions drawn from the wrong tools could be revised. She called Priya the next morning. Priya was careful and specific. She did not offer a program or a promise. She offered 4 names, 4 approaches she had encountered in her own journey and in her work as a counselor with people who had been where Diana was. She explained each one honestly, including what it was not, and why she thought it might reach something that the methods Diana had already tried had not. She said, "Trauma is not a memory problem, Diana. It is a body problem. The mind can understand that something is over. The nervous system has its own timeline. What you have been doing, the medication, the talk therapy, those are real and they help, but they speak to the mind. What you may need are approaches that speak to the body directly, that work in the language the body actually understands." Diana wrote down the 4 names. She sat with them for a week. Then, on a Saturday morning, she made the first appointment. The first door was EMDR. She walked into the trauma specialist's office skeptical in the way that people are skeptical when they have already tried several things, and the trying has become its own kind of exhaustion. The waiting room brochure described a process that sounded on paper almost implausible, tracking the therapist's moving hand with her eyes while holding a specific memory. She almost left. She stayed. In her first session, something happened that she did not have adequate words for afterward. The memory she had been holding, a specific night, a specific voice, a specific fear that had lived in her body for 15 years with the permanence of something structural, began to change its quality. Not disappear. Change. The grip of it loosened in a way she could feel physically, the way you feel a knot release in a muscle you had stopped noticing was tight. She said something afterward, almost to herself. "That happened to me, and it happened a long time ago. It is not happening right now." She had thought those words 1,000 times. In the therapist's office, for the first time, her body agreed with them. By the 6th session, she was sleeping through the night. The second door was yoga, not the kind she had tried once at a gym and abandoned, performance-oriented, mirror-lined, nothing like what she needed. This was a small trauma-sensitive class, 8 women in a church basement, no mirrors, no instruction to achieve anything, just breath and movement and the quiet permission to feel whatever was there. The instructor said something in the first session that Diana wrote in her notebook immediately. Your body has been trying to protect you for years. Today, we are just going to say thank you. Over 12 weeks, Diana learned something she had not been taught and had not thought to look for, that her body was not her adversary, that the tightness in her chest and the tension she carried in her jaw and the shallow breathing she had normalized for so long they had stopped registering as abnormal were not malfunctions. They were messages. A body doing its best with the information it had been given. She learned to breathe past the panic instead of bracing against it. She learned to feel her own feet on the floor, present, grounded, here, rather than slightly outside herself looking in. For the first time since her 20s, she felt like she lived inside her own body rather than at a careful remove from it. The third door surprised her most. A community organization downtown ran a program for trauma survivors using improvisational theater. When Priya had mentioned it, Diana had laughed. She was not an actress. She had no interest in performing for anyone. That is exactly why it works, Priya had said. She joined reluctantly, with the particular stubbornness of someone who has committed to trying things they do not yet believe in. The first night, they did not perform anything. They walked around the room in different ways, like someone who had just received wonderful news, like someone who was very tired, like someone who was not afraid. It felt childish. It felt like the kind of thing she would normally have quietly excused herself from. And then something opened. Because for 15 years, Diana had walked one way, carefully, quietly, with the specific economy of movement that belongs to a person who has learned at cost that taking up space invites consequences. And here, in a church hall with 11 strangers who were not watching her the way she had been watched, she walked across the room like someone who was not afraid. Her body did not know it was pretending. Week by week she played characters she had no prior acquaintance with. Characters who were bold, who were angry, who were joyful, who occupied space without calculating the cost. Characters who said no with their whole chest and yes with their whole voice. Each role taught her nervous system something her mind had been attempting to communicate for years, patiently, without sufficient equipment. You are allowed to be here. You are allowed to be loud. You are allowed to take up room. The fourth door was neurofeedback. 8 months into her healing, her therapist introduced it, a process where sensors on the scalp measured her brain's electrical activity in real time, and trained it, gently and repeatedly, toward calmer patterns through audio feedback. When her brain produced calm, focused waves, a pleasant sound continued. When it drifted toward the hypervigilant patterns that had been her default for 15 years, the sound stopped. Within 10 sessions, Diana noticed something she had not felt since childhood. She could sit in silence without bracing. The vigilance, that full-body, exhausting, permanent alertness that had been her companion for so long she had forgotten, it was not simply who she was had begun, quietly and measurably, to quiet. Her brain, after 15 years of being wired for threat as its natural resting state, was being offered a new default. She did not have a dramatic name for it. She called it simply safe. 1 year after her lunch with Priya, Diana was sitting in her apartment on a Saturday morning with coffee and the particular quality of quiet that belongs to a person who is not, for the moment, managing anything. She had not had a nightmare in 6 weeks. The previous Thursday, her neighbor had knocked unexpectedly, 2 sharp knocks, the same sound that had sent her to the wall in the library, and she had walked to the door and opened it without her heart leaving her chest. She had gone on a first date and been present for it, not performing presence, actually present in the conversation, in the moment, in her own body in a restaurant with another person without the background hum of threat assessment running beneath everything. She was not fixed. She did not believe in fixed, and she had made a kind of peace with that. Healing was not a destination she had arrived at. It was a direction she was now, genuinely and sustainably, moving in. She called Priya. It worked, she said. "I know," said Priya. "Now pass it on." Diana thought about the women in the yoga class, the 11 strangers in the theater program, the therapist who had waited patiently through her skepticism, the counselor at a conference lunch who had left a door open and said simply, "I used to be where you are. I was wrong." She thought about what it would have meant to hear that 15 years earlier. She thought about who in her life was currently in a room she could see into, carrying something they had stopped naming because they had run out of faith that naming it would help. She picked up her phone. On a Sunday afternoon some weeks later, Diana took a walk through her neighborhood, the long route, the one that wound through the park where the trees were beginning to turn. She walked without earphones, without her phone in her hand, without the background audit of the environment that had been her involuntary companion for 15 years, the low, constant checking, the cataloging of exits and distances and the positions of strangers. She just walked. She thought about the word her body had been trying to tell her since 2009, the word that all 4 doors in their different languages had been working to deliver. Not a word she had been able to think her way to, or medicate her way to, or will her way to, because thinking and medicating and willing had never been the problem. The problem had been located somewhere the thinking could not reach, in a part of her that operated below language, below intention, below everything she had previously understood as the self she could work with. Her nervous system had needed to learn something her mind had known for years, that it was over, that she was safe, that the body carrying her through the park on this Sunday afternoon was not the body in danger that it had been protecting for 15 years. That protection was no longer the primary task. That something else was available now, not the absence of the past, but the genuine, physical, embodied presence of the present. She stopped on the path and stood for a moment among the turning trees. She was not running. She was not bracing. She was not a stranger in her own body, managing the distance between herself and her own life. She was simply there. It was, she thought, the most ordinary thing she had ever felt. It was the thing she had been working toward for 15 years. My friend, Diana's story is not about the specific experiences she carried or the specific methods she used to begin moving through them. It is about something that belongs to everyone who has ever tried to heal something deep by applying tools designed for the surface. We live in a world that treats recovery as a cognitive project. Think differently. Reframe the narrative. Develop insight into the patterns. These things are real and they matter, but they address the mind. And for many of the wounds that people carry, the mind is not where the wound lives. Trauma, and by this I mean not only dramatic events but any experience that taught your nervous system to stay on permanent alert, does not live in your thoughts. It lives in your body. In your breathing and your startle response and the tension you carry in places you have stopped noticing because they have been tense for so long. In the hypervigilance you have renamed cautiousness. In the smallness you have renamed humility. In the exhaustion you have renamed your personality. You cannot think your way out of something your body is holding. What you can do, what Diana found through 4 very different doors, is give your body new experiences, new information. Consistent, repeated signals that contradict the ones it received in the past, movement that teaches it presence, breath that teaches it safety, rhythm that teaches it calm, practice that teaches it that taking up space is not dangerous. This is not fast work. It is not linear work. It does not happen because you decided to do it, but because you kept doing it long after the deciding felt certain. But it is available to you. Whatever you are carrying, whatever room you have not entered in however many years, there is a door. There is more than one door. And the bravest thing you can do, not the loudest, not the most dramatic, but the bravest, is take one step toward one of them. Here is your challenge, the same quiet turning point Diana reached in a library, surrounded by children's books, with her heart refusing to settle after a knock on an open door. First, name the thing your body does that your mind has made peace with but your body hasn't. The startle, the shutdown, the way certain sounds or spaces or interactions pull you somewhere you did not choose to go. Not to diagnose it or explain it, just to name it honestly to yourself, as something that is still happening rather than something you have finished with. That honesty is the beginning. Second, consider which of the 4 doors Diana walked through might speak to something in your own experience. EMDR for the memories that still have grip. Trauma-sensitive movement for the body that has been bracing. Expressive practice, theater, dance, voice, any form for the parts of yourself you have learned to make small. Neurofeedback or other nervous system work for the baseline alertness that has become your default. You do not need to walk through all of them. You need to walk through one. Research one. Make one call. Take one step toward one door. Third, tell someone. Not necessarily the whole story, just enough to stop carrying it entirely alone. Because isolation is one of the ways that old wounds stay closed systems, recycling the same signals without new information ever getting in. One person who knows, a friend, a counselor, a stranger in a comment section who recognizes something in what you have shared, changes the architecture of the thing you are carrying. You are not broken. You are not too far gone. You are not the kind of person for whom healing is unavailable. You are a person whose body learned something painful and has not yet had the right conditions to learn something different. Those conditions can be built, starting now if you choose. If this story reached something in you, if you recognized yourself in Diana's exhaustion, or in the knock on the door, or in the 15 years of being the strong one while privately running, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Not to fix them, just to let them know that the door exists. Sometimes that is enough. If you are currently carrying something heavy and would like support finding a first step, share it in the comments. This community will meet you there. Subscribe for more stories about the full, complicated, genuinely hopeful work of becoming more yourself. And if you are in crisis or need immediate support, please reach out to a mental health professional or crisis line. You do not have to find the door alone. Remember, you cannot think your way out of what your body is holding, but your body can learn. It has always been able to learn. And the bravest step is not the dramatic one, it is the quiet one, the first appointment, the first class. The first time you walk across the room like someone who is not afraid. Your body doesn't know it's practicing. Until one day it isn't. Heal at your own pace. Ask for what you need. And never mistake the years you spent surviving for evidence that thriving is not available to you, because surviving, done for long enough, is its own form of extraordinary strength. You just deserve to use that strength for something better now.